And so it probably pops up for you now that you see that we're recording up in the left, and your little light probably pops up. Okay.
See it.
All right. So thank you for sharing your time and the gift of your stories. We can take a break at any point. If you need to go do anything, we can pause. I'm Amanda Ray, and I am working with Blue Ridge Pride and the YMCA to record oral histories from elders and members of the LGBT community in Western North Carolina. With your permission, all stories will be archived with special collections at UNC Asheville and available as audio, video, or typed transcriptions. Before we make anything public, David, I will email you, and I can snail mail it as well if you prefer, your typed transcription. You can go through it line by line, correct errors, spellings, anything like that.
Oh, okay.
Nothing will be published until I hear from you directly. And this is me being OCD, but I talk to every single participant, even if I don't interview them, just to make sure that I have their consent, even though you also sign this form. Because this is a lot of private information. This is your life. I don't want to,
Yeah.
Okay. So today's date is September the 29th. And I am here with David Hopes. Would you mind to say your name, how you would like it to be published, and maybe pronouns or how we should refer to you?
My name is David Hopes, he, him.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. I wonder if you just wanted to start by telling me a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in Asheville?
I ended up in Asheville because I interviewed for a job at UNCA. It was the year I had finished my dissertation, and I'd taught for a year I'd done a couple of other things, and it was time to get a long-lasting job, and so I interviewed and came here. This is the one I chose. I moved here in July of 1983. And part of the literature and language department as it was, and I came here as to head the creative writing program, which I did for 10 years, and passed it off to Rick Chess, and lived out in Candler, out in the woods, which was an interesting beginning to things, and I learned about people I would not have met otherwise. For the first while I was here, the gay life that I understood was mostly bars, and I want to say that's what gay life was, or I was not aware of the political side of it. There might have been a political side, and I didn't know. I was just busy going to bars. In tiny little Asheville, there were at one time 6 gay bars downtown, and nothing else. Nothing else. Right. There was Three Brothers Restaurant and gay bars. That was it. And so if you went downtown to these bars, you could be pretty sure that anyone you met on the street was doing the same thing that you were doing, which was fascinating. I started going to All Souls Church, and which was highly politicized and highly pro LGBTQ at the time. That abbreviation was not in use at the time, I don't think, but it was very much in favor of gay and lesbian persons. And they had an organization called Closer, which I think it just formed the year I arrived. And it was for gay people to get to know each other. So that added the first.
Do you remember what was the acronym? Community Liaison Organization for, I don't remember.
I don't either. I don't know what the SER is. I've completely forgotten. Community Liaison Organization for.
But they were active for 2 decades at least, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And sort of disappeared when gay life in Asheville became less political, more personal. When everyone got old and was tending the gardens, essentially. Closer eventually threw out a couple of branches, and one was SALGA, the Southern Appalachian Lesbian and Gay Alliance, which was far more political. and I became active in Salga for a while. One of the things that happened when I was active in Salga, well, a number of things happened. One thing, we tangled with the state because we wanted our name on the highways that we were cleaning up, and they didn't want it on the highway, so that was a big deal.
I've seen the news
You see
articles
that?
about that actually. Jim Kavanagh. Do you know Jim
Oh
Kavanagh?
God, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I interviewed Jim a couple of times, and he gave us just the richest materials, boxes
absolutely.
and boxes of stuff. And I saw this article about how the sign kept getting torn down, right?
Yes. Well, Jim was the the editorial editor at the Citizen Times then, so all the stuff came through him.
Yeah.
And um, I, since Jim Kavanagh and the newspaper has come up, let me make a detour and say that it was an interesting time because the policy of the newspaper then was to, I believe, was to publish whatever came in. And so every month or so, there would be this vicious anti-gay diatribe, which I could not stop myself from answering. And, so that went on for a while. And I sort of accidentally became a spokesman for gay people in Asheville, because I kept mouthing off to people who had mouthed off in the newspaper. And so Jim Kavanagh was a stalwart in this. He made sure that both sides were represented, and that if an anti-gay letter had gone on unanswered, that someone would answer it. So he was behind the scenes, but very important in all this.
So can you give me a date here? About when was this? In the early 90s?
I think before that, end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. Yeah. It lasted a while. There was a famous Sunday when I received a phone call. They said, you have to turn into TV to Trinity Baptist. And Ralph Sexton at Trinity Baptist was giving a sermon about me. Because at that time, I was the faculty advisor for, let me get this right, for the Wiccans and for the Latter-day Saints, and also a gay activist. So he was just going on about what was wrong with UNCA, because you could have a quick club for the Wiccans. So it was really, there were community meetings. One of the important ones was in Lipinski Hall, where Ralph Sexton would say his piece and be refuted by people in the lesbian gay community. For a while, I had in my house a hotline that Salga had set up for people who had been harassed or abused. Gay people who thought they were being harassed or abused. And that gave me, and I was the answering person to that, and it gave me another perspective on what was going on, because people were suffering, especially teachers were suffering things that I had no previous knowledge of. UNCA is, I don't know, it's not completely without problems in that area, but largely without problems in that area. But the public schools are not.
No.
So it was an eye opener. I don't actually know what happened to all that. Salga, everything has a lifespan. And one day I woke up and there was no Salga. And I don't remember why that was, but it was very vital for a while. One day I woke up and there was no Closer. And I don't actually know why that was, but.
Tell me how you ended up having the hotline in your house. So Saga came after Closer, right?
Well, at the same time, they were like I don't know, NAACP and SNCC. One was when they existed at the same time, but one was much more political and forceful. I went to the meetings at Salga and saw something that I could possibly do, and so I volunteered, and so they installed the phone there.
So were you the only hotline, or did other people have these kinds of hotlines in their house?
I was the only Salga hotline. Now there might have been all sorts of other hotlines, that had to do with other things, but this is the one for Salga.
So were you a listening person, or did you have like resources that you gave people, or were there things you did? I don't know. When somebody calls in and tells you a story, what happened next?
I had no training whatever, so I had to use my best my best judgment. So I mostly just listened, and if I thought of suggestions, I would make them. But often people in that situation want their story to be told.
Right.
I was also writing for community connections, and occasionally these things could find their way in there.
And so how would you do that? You wouldn't, of course, like write about a specific person, but you might like elevate their need and through community connections.
Well, since the community connections was actually a legitimate journalistic enterprise, it wanted to be a newspaper. I shouldn't put it that way. It was a newspaper.
Yeah.
And so what you would do is you'd go and interview the person who had caused the trouble without mentioning what the trouble was, and say, well, how do you, are you happy about having gay faculty in your junior high? And then just let them approach it from a whole new side, so you'd have to be subtle, but you could get to it.
Tell me a story about one of those times when you went and interviewed somebody. If you remember one.
I do remember one. I don't know. Here's one of the places where I'm going to be devious. But there was a local person who was one of these people who had written to the paper many times about how gay people were causing moral problems in the city, and opposed pro-gay initiatives in the city council, etc., and even demonstrated in front of All Souls at one point. Well, because of my own adventurous spirit, I had encountered him at a rest stop at one point. Oh. Now, I didn't want to say, well, do you remember? So
we see each other somewhere.
Yeah, darn it. So what I had to do is I had to go and interview him about his problem with gay people, and about halfway through, he remembered me. And so that was never in the newspaper, because he backtracked like mad, and I thought that he should have the opportunity to backtrack, because it seemed to recognize a big fat hypocrisy in his life, and so the work was done. So that's one.
Wow, that's
I know.
Okay, I have a few things I want to go back to. So let's go back to when you first get here and you're living in Candler on a farm.
Yes.
Yeah, somewhere out in the middle. One of the oldest gay bars in the region was in Candler. Opened in like 1967. You can believe that?
I did not know that. Was it still open when I got here?
No, not
okay.
actually. It closed, I think, in 1975, maybe 1972.
Isn't that interesting?
I'll look the name up for you and I'll send it to you. That was information I found doing that research for Holly's article. But tell me what it was like. So why Candler? Why'd you live there and not in Asheville? And
Amanda,
how old were you in 1983? Let me get your birthday.
September 1st, 1950.
Gotcha.
So I was 32. I didn't know how to do what I was doing. I didn't know how to be a new college professor. It never occurred to me to ask, help me find a place to live. It never occurred to me, so when I got here with my car loaded, I started looking around for a place to live. And one of the places that I said, a lovely cabin by a lake in Canada. So I found it. That cabin had been rented, but there were like little apartments in a row, like a motel, and those were open. And I panicked and took one of those. And so that's how and this was way out under the shadow of Mount Pisgah. And so in some ways it was fascinating. It was about an hour drive into campus. through winding roads and stuff. So it was fascinating, but it also had to do with my not knowing how to ask the right questions. And I didn't get anyone to help. I could have gotten someone to help me, but I just didn't think of it. So it was completely by accident. I was surrounded by, what do I want to say, criminals of various, mostly having to do with the drug trade. And I remember one guy coming over and knocking on the door, and I opened the door. And he says, "You're gay, aren't you?" And I thought, "Whoa!" Well, because I had friends over, and I thought, well, this is the end of it. That's, he came in and had a beer, and that was it. So my experiences in Candler, associated with the gay life, are neutral. I mean, the people that knew it didn't seem to care, or sometimes people send me signals that I don't get. So I might have been getting signals that I wasn't picking up. But that was perfectly fine. One of the professors, Jeff Rackham, I don't know that you knew him. Did you know him?
I know of him.
Oh, okay.
I've met him, but I know of him.
He went on a Fulbright to Macedonia and had me house sit. And so I house sat for a semester. By that time I was in town. And so I just moved in town after that. But that's how I got out at that. And I had been living in New York, a fairly active sexual life. And so one of the first things I did was found out how to do that here. And so, when I was looking for an apartment, I had a magical sense for where you stand to get picked up. And so at that time, there was a particular place downtown, and I just knew that and that happened. And I got picked up by a lineman for the power company, who we had a relationship, but he also filled me in on places to go, which was basically at that time, Craig's and O. Henry's were the two big places, soon followed by Cockatoo and all that stuff. Craig's and O. Henry were the big places. And so I, did everything I could to drive in from Canada in the dead of night to get associated with that.
I heard also the Grove Arcade was a place. I've interviewed Michael Harney a couple of times, and so
the beach,
exactly. That's
yeah. I didn't do that so much, but one did. I mean, one certainly could do that. Yeah, I don't even. Do you suppose that's still going on that way? I don't even know. I've so lost track. Well, Bent Creek. If the Bent Creek experimental forest. If you walk there, especially over the weekend, you would be there looking for a hookup. You'd be walking through the woods. So you see that you get different kinds of people in different areas. You get that.
Warren Wilson, the trail at Warren Wilson is the place for that.
Well, I never did that, but I don't doubt it at all. See, it's just like, and I'm sorry. The kids probably know the same place, different places, but I don't know what they are anymore. But those were what they are, and it was sort of magical how you got to know them, because you just sort of got to know them, by wanting to see them, you saw them, and that's still miraculous to me. Just sort of the first day I was here, I knew where to stand. I thought that's just okay, that's weird, but it was also exciting.
Absolutely. One of the other people, a trans woman that I've interviewed, said, there was no Twitter, there was no way to know, everything was word of mouth, all social organizing and socializing and gathering. It all was considered, happening just by word of mouth, and you had to know somebody, and entering the space was the hardest part. So you
had to have someone sign you in to places like Greg's. So you had to know somebody that'll get you in.
Yeah. So tell me what happened before you were here. I guess, like, where were you born? I think Akron, Ohio. Is that where you were born? And you went to college. And what happened before 1983?
I grew up in Akron, Ohio. Went to the public schools. I went to Hiram College, which is a little college between Akron and Cleveland. I went to Johns Hopkins for graduate school. Had a series of catastrophes there, and I sort of dropped out of everything. When I got myself back together, I went to graduate school at Syracuse, where I got an MA and a PhD. I'm so sorry. PhD and all that sort of stuff. I taught for a year at Syracuse. Then I was writer in residence at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. Then I taught for a year at my alma mater at Hiram. And I was there when I interviewed here. And so that's my professional life. It's sort of straight, except for that one little ditch. It's sort of straight and narrow.
UNCA seems to do that to people.
And look pretty good on paper. Say again?
I said UNCA seems to do that to people. It gets us here, and then we just don't really go anywhere else, which is it's a nice testament.
Well, when I got here, I thought I'll be here 5 years and then move on.
Oh.
I actually applied for and got. I wasn't happy here at first.
Okay.
Is your connection good?
I think so. I'm at the university, so I assume it's better here than anywhere else.
Oh, okay. Because I think something going in and out. It's probably my side.
Okay.
What did you ask me? I forgot.
So tell me why you weren't happy, or why you anticipated you would leave once you got here within 5 years.
It's the South, and it was a shock. I'd never been surrounded by people who had the opinions about things that the people down here did.
Mm.
At first, well, I guess, pardon me 1 second. For the first,
if you need to go get a drink or anything, I'm happy to pause.
I think I'll do that because I'm going to just keep coughing at you. So I'll be right back. There you go. Now I might not choke to death.
It's funny how many people in the middle of their interviews are like, I need to get some water, because you're talking the whole time.
Yeah. Well, and something was up in there. Before I came to Asheville, I had lived for several years quite cosmopolitan, energetic, and sexually driven life. And that changed for several reasons when I got here. And my attempt at reestablishing that was not successful because this is Asheville, it's not New York.
Mm-hmm.
So Amanda, I've never thought about why I was not happy here until you asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of the answer that came to mind. I was ambitious. And was Asheville a place to work out your ambition? I didn't know. I did apply for other jobs, got them, and then didn't take them. And so there was something that said, you want to be here. And as time went on, I'm retired now, and everyone says, well, you're going to stay in Asheville. And I said, yeah, it never crossed my mind to leave. So all that reconciled. So, and the South was a shock at first, just the way people think, the way people deal with each other. I'm sort of direct, and the circular way people go about things in the South always, still to this day, takes me by surprise. To hear from a third party some problem, it still takes me by surprise. So I think being in the South was a bit of a shock.
So do you think that circular way is related to social politeness in some way, or what do you mean by the circular way that people deal with each other?
If Jane Smith and I have a quarrel, Jane Smith will never tell me, I'm not satisfied with how that came out, let's talk about it more. She'll talk to 15 other people, and then it will get back to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you said the same sort of thing.
Yeah. I've lived my whole life in the South, so it's just,
It's not shocking. Okay. Okay. I'd never in my life say, bless his heart. Never would I say.
Yeah. Well, that's offensive, right? Like to say that about somebody, right?
I know. Yeah, it's just it could be that it's not South at all. It could be that just the sort of person I am does not deal well with not knowing what the score is, without the lack of directness.
Transparency.
Yeah.
You said that it was kind of a shock in the South, the opinions people had. Did you encounter much anti-gay rhetoric? I mean, you talked a lot about Ralph Sexton or mentioned that, but in terms of at work or in your day-to-day life?
Yes. And again, it was so hidden that each time was a shock.
Oh,
Um, I thought that my students wouldn't know or wouldn't care that I was gay. And I never said that I was because I thought, well, what's that anybody's concern? But I remember on the day before class began, and we hadn't met the classes yet, a boy who was going to be in my humanities class, I could hear this. Well, I was walking into what's the place by the humanities lecture hall?
Lipinski?
I was walking.
No.
No, the classroom building.
Oh, White, is it Whiteside? Is that which one?
No, it's the old one. But anyhow, I was walking into one of the classroom buildings, and one student said to another, "Well, who do you have humanities?" And the guy goes, "Well, I had hopes." He did this big fag thing, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God," you know. And he didn't see me, and so when I saw him the next day, I realized that he didn't realize. And I thought, where the fuck did that come from?
Hmm.
Because I don't think I'm particularly effeminate, and
Hmm.
that is just people knew, and that was the first thing he had to say about me. So it was that, that sort of thing.
How did that feel going in the first day then with that? I guess feeling like not that you were hiding it, but that it was hidden. That's what you said. It seemed so hidden.
Well, it always surprises me when someone is interested in that. And and if they're interested in it and don't come to me about it. Hopes, we hear you're gay. What's that? And just have this whole other story built up about it. And so he had this whole narrative he was doing that I wouldn't recognize as being part of me. I didn't recognize that as part of my narrative. So the thing was, whether they knew I was gay or not, whether they cared or whether they didn't, I wanted it to be more visible because I don't know what to do about it if I don't know it's there. And he was not a bad student. He never mentioned anything about that in class. I'm thinking, did I misinterpret it? Has he changed his mind? Is he sitting there thinking, God, I hate you, you fag, and successfully covering it up? So it's just that sort of thing. You get the same thing with religion. The people you're talking about, evolution or something, and then at the end of the year, you get these long essays about how Jesus is the Lord of the world, and I have to reject everything. And I'm thinking, why did you bring that up at the time? We could,
Yeah.
just this whole hidden world. Yeah, we could have talked about, and people resenting because their point of view was not honored. And my response to that, how do I know you had that point of view? So that this is the only place I've taught for any length of time. So it might be the same everywhere. But I blamed UNCA. I blamed the South for it. That people would have these entire narratives that they didn't
Mm.
share, and therefore they got weirder and weirder.
Yeah. Well, speaking of some of that stuff, can we go back to you when you were doing the hotline? You talked about teachers were really suffering here. Could you characterize that time? Tell us some things about that time. This is in the early '80s, right?
Yeah, look, middle and late 80s. Yeah,
Okay.
um, a public school teacher, actually, I sang with him in the All Souls Choir later on, so I knew him. These people could be anonymous, but I recognized his voice. Who had been threatened by his principal not to ask for a raise, not to do this, that, and the other, because the principal knew he was gay, and he better not step out of line in any additional way.
Oh.
You know,
So,
you
like,
know,
to advocate for himself to ask for a raise was to put his job at threat. Wow. So we're tolerating you.
yes, yeah, we've gone already a huge distance, not firing you on the spot. And
Wow.
and that seemed to me to be widespread. That um, uh, that the idea was that even to be allowed your career was a concession to a gay person. You know, you've already got that. How could you want anything else? You should just shut up and enjoy that. And I didn't get that people recognized that that was weird in any way. It just is the way people thought. It's the whole question of special privileges. The accusing gay people of wanting special privileges because they want the same privileges other people have. And you know, the interpretation, we're already enduring you because you're gay. What else do you want?
Now you want to get married and have babies?
Now you want to get married, right? You don't want to lose your job, please.
And so you feel like that wasn't located in any one school district or any one age
I had
group?
no way of knowing because the people didn't all the time specify that. I had a couple of calls from North Buncombe. I do know that, and there was at sometimes some problem with that there. There seemed to have been a culture among the students, an anti-gay culture among the students. Here's my interpretation of that. I think as a boy would call another boy a faggot without any sexual implication to it, you know, I think that people were in North Buncombe were using that word and calling each other queer without really meaning to have any reference to gay people, you know, and I think that people can be sensitive to that sort of thing. It's a little like misgendering a trans person. You know, that sometimes that's just a mistake, but when it's heard, it becomes a political issue. You know, so who knows? I wasn't a student in North Buncombe, but it seemed to me that a little of that was going on. It was just careless rhetoric, you know, that was hurting people's feelings. But
and there weren't any. I mean, even now, there's not. Even now in 2020, there's still so few legal ways to help LGBT folks retain jobs and stuff. If you know, so I can't imagine how little support there was.
oh yeah,
You know,
and I felt lucky in that because I never felt threatened at UNCA for being. I felt really lucky. It never even crossed my mind, you know. And I think that was fortunate. Not Peter Kendrick. There was a faculty member here in political science whose name I'm not remembering. But he was a contemporary of Peter Kendrick and me, who felt that was why he was not ever granted tenure. Felt that was the reason. But who knows? I wasn't on the tenure committee, so I don't.
So when you were dating, did you bring your partners with you to UNCA events without
Never.
Or, okay, tell me why.
I brought women. I dated women here, and one of the last woman I actually dated seriously was a aerobics instructor at the Westgate Spa, and we got to be friendly. And I could remember bringing her to a Halloween party at Merritt Mosley's house, and introducing her as, you know, and later thinking, oh dear God, because I wasn't intending to be deceptive. Right. You know, I really wanted to bring teachers to the party, and I thought it would keep people from having to have another issue. But afterwards, I thought, oh my God, you know, but what have I done? But I had never brought a male date to anything at the university, and I never thought of that until you asked the question.
So after the Halloween party, why did you feel like, dear God, what have I done? Did you feel like you were giving them a false impression, or? I mean, if you dated women, you got to date women, right?
Well, yeah, that wasn't, I guess that's not a false impression, but somewhere inside me, I was using her as a beard. And even if that was not conscious at the moment, I knew it somewhere inside me, because I could have, you know, just not brought anyone, you know, not her fault.
Interesting.
Oh boy. Did you know that you mentioned Tom Boswell earlier? Holly Boswell. Did he tell you about directing me in a play?
So I read about it in some of Holly's papers, actually, that she was part of, I can't remember what the group was called, but
Asheville Repertory Theater.
yeah, exactly. Tell me about that.
Uh-huh.
I'd love to hear anything. I'd listen.
Asheville Repertory Theater was in the space that is now above dinner. Pardon me, above table. You
Table,
know
yeah,
the restaurant?
yeah.
Yeah, it was above that. So it was on the second floor, and it was the magnetic theater of its time. It didn't do original works, but it did new works.
Hmm.
And the one that she was Tom at the time, the director was called Days of Possibilities. And it was about the student uprisings in Oberlin the generation before. And so it was really kind of fascinating. But I don't know what to say, he or she. He at that time also was a lay minister or a internet minister and performed a marriage for one of my best friends, Kevin Ficori, whom I don't know if that's come up or not, but yeah, I first knew Holly through the play, and at one point she came in dressed differently and said, "I would like you to call me Holly." So that, and
So
I
that
had never heard
happened,
that.
that
Yeah,
transition really happened right in the midst of the play.
in the rehearsal.
And so what year was that?
Um, I'm going to say 89. I can look that up and I'll
Right.
get back to you on that.
That sounds about right, though. Because the first time Holly ever went into O. Henry's dressed as Holly was in like 1990, 1991. And Rosie Coates was there. Do you know Rosie?
I know Rosie, absolutely I do, yes.
So
Absolutely.
that is a fantastic interview. I cannot wait to sit down with Rosie and do a follow up. Tina did the first interview, but wow! So Rosie talks a lot about that block downtown. Like this was LGBT space there.
Yes.
You know, and then Emoke moved up the hill and opened Malaprops right down. You know, O. Henry's was right next door, and just
Yes.
all of that. It's really amazing. We've done a historical walking tour to teach high schoolers LGBT history here in Asheville. It's very cool.
That's interesting. That is fascinating.
It's a scavenger
Wow.
hunt, actually.
Huh.
So they use a little app and we give them little clues and they have to do historical research to locate the landmark. And then we have Rosie telling stories or some of our other participants telling stories about when they first went to Malaprops and stuff like that. So tell us some stories about some of these places and we'll include your voice in that. Do you have any stories about really formative places early or late?
Well, I would think the most formative all early on was O. Henry's. The kids would go to Craig's, but the old time people or natives and
In
stuff.
their 30s, is that the old time people?
Yes, well, I've always thought of myself as younger than I actually am. Would go to. Have you been told about Chroma, the bartender at O. Henry's?
No.
Well, he was the father of the gay community. I mean, he would help you. He'd help you find an apartment. He would give you a note so you could get into Craig's. He would introduce you around. He was there for maybe 2 or 3 years when I was, but then he went off with his lover to Atlanta and lost track of him. But he was a really important person. Rosie would know about him.
Hmm.
But the first place I'd ever seen a woman in, well, that's not true. The first drag show I ever saw was at O. Henry's. And I think that's reasonably formative.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
people would all the time be in fights at O. Henry's, and it wasn't fights between gay people and straight people. It was fights between gay people. It was like lovers' quarrels and stuff. So it was rich. It was rich and familial. And they would look at, if you were too drunk, they would call you a cab. It was really quite lovely. And downstairs, when they finally opened the downstairs, there would be dancing. There would be country dancing. which was a big thing for a while.
Mm.
At first, you could get one of the best lunches in town at O'Henry's because it served sandwiches and stuff, and so you would go there to eat during the day. But they got past that.
Well, they were the one of two places downtown that served alcohol during the day. So
Where was the other place? Was it the hotel? I don't even know.
I have it in my notes. But it was a professional men's club. So they didn't really
Oh,
even let a lot of women, it was mostly a business person kind of place.
sure,
But the
sure.
stand-up shop, that was one of the things that I learned was and then they started playing disco. Rosie says once they started playing disco, everybody knew.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, yeah, you could tell. Um, and it sort of had a war with the bar that is now by the crap on Broadway. Uh, it's right by
Was it Hairspray?
no no, it wasn't Hairspray. No, there was a straight men's bar, a redneck bar, and there would be sort of an unspoken tension between between those two bars. You go back. Of course, you could go back and forth. No one would say anything. But that was the daring thing to do, is to have a couple of drinks at the redneck bar and then go back to Henry's and then talk about it. That was fun. It hasn't been the same since it moved.
Yeah, which they lost their lease, right? It became too expensive.
I don't know why. That must be it. I never knew why.
I wonder, tell me about the first drag show. What did you think about that? If you've not ever seen one, after being in New York and everywhere, how did you not see drag? Was that?
Well, I'm thinking that my time is up because I know the places where I went in New York, they did not have drag shows. But I'd seen it in Pensacola. I guess I'd seen it in grad school. I suppose I didn't expect it in Asheville.
Oh, okay.
And I think that was what it was. And I'm not a great fan of drag, but it was remarkable what was remarkable to me because someone was very much into something I flat did not understand. People had devoted themselves to it, and I was sitting there thinking that can't be your authentic self. I don't believe it. That Madge, the truck stop waitress with Buffon is not your authentic. But so I couldn't get past that. But I did appreciate. Oh, you'll like this. The first faculty report at the end of the year that I made it at Asheville, I included in my community service judging a drag show. I guess this was a cockatoo. It was in a different bar. And Mike Gillum almost hit the ceiling. He said, "You can't put that on there." So Mike Gillum made me take judging a drag show off my community service on my faculty record.
And how'd you feel about that? Well, you're all right with that?
It didn't seem very university-like. It surprised. I didn't mind it. I didn't feel oppressed or anything. But I thought that's not very open-minded. And also it's not exhibiting much of a sense of humor. I thought it was sort of funny, and I thought everyone would think it was funny. So it didn't seem collegey to me. But
do you have stories about whether related to university or just sorry, there's my thing saying. Do you have other stories where something you thought might be really funny just didn't play out the way you expected in a professional context like that? Not necessarily at the university, but just, you've had so many professional selves, really. Like, you are such a Renaissance individual.
Well, Amanda, one of the things that I think I mentioned a little earlier is that I'm not always keenly aware of the impression I'm making. So there may have been times when I was offending or shocking and simply did not know it. And I say that because there were times when I would say something in class or in a community situation that people would go on forever about, and I didn't know it until someone accidentally said it. I used to have an art gallery downtown in public service board, and I had nudes, up on the wall, and people would walk by, go, "Yeah." And I didn't know that the bank across the street and some women upstairs that how do I put this, were trying to think the organization, but they served women who had been abused. Were furious with me and were just indignant, and this went on for months, and they were angrier and angrier. Finally, a woman I had working for me said, "David, you have to come down here." And I had no idea until that moment that everyone was mad at me. Because as we talked about earlier, nobody said a thing, not to me. And what did I do? I took the paintings down. It's like, so the answer to the question is, I probably have done horrible things that shocked people to death. And I didn't know, because I don't know until someone tells me.
You had paintings that's what they found offensive, were your paintings. Tell me what the nature of your paintings were.
Well, it wasn't just me. It was, I had nude paintings up, but they were by a bunch of people. The one that really got people was in fact by me. It was a friend of mine who was standing naked with his dick in his hand. And I thought it was cute. I thought it was kind of funny because, he had his expression on his face like, haha. And the people that looked at it would give me the thumbs up and like it was funny. So I thought I was doing, this triumphant deed of public relations, and people were going to be friendly with art, when I was infuriating everyone, and I just, sorry. So, and plays that I've done would be months later, and I'd hear about them say, well, you did X, Y, and Z. And I'd realize that it caused a stir, and I didn't know. So I think I have escaped internally the repercussions of horrible things I've done, because I just didn't know they were horrible.
I wonder if you could talk just a bit about, it seems like, you've written a ridiculous amount of stuff. It's really impressive. And it seems like LGBT themes run into a lot of your written work and maybe even also your art. Could you talk about that a little bit? Is that intentional? Does it just work out that way?
Both. It's both intentional and both worked out that way. When I started being called a gay writer, now I had was including gay anthologies in the 90s, Men on Men and things like that. I realized that if that were going to be the case, I wanted to be a particular kind of gay writer. And when I started doing plays, a lot of my plays had gay themes, and I was a gay playwright. And so I was also a Southern playwright, which was really shocking to me. There's no such thing as an Ohio playwright. You can be a Southern playwright, but you can't be an Ohio, anyhow. I wanted to be
It's more about Ohio people than Southerners. We like to explain it, right?
Yeah, it might. I wanted to be the gay writer who assumes that being gay is perfectly ordinary. I will never write a coming out story. Never, ever. I will never, ever have a character say, well, I'm this, that, and other because I'm gay. But my characters are gay and do gay things without mentioning it. And that part of it is deliberate, because I want to get past, I want the gay and lesbian section of the bookstore to disappear. And it just be, contemporary fiction.
This desire to normalize, right?
Yeah. Because, in the gay life, at least the way I lived, there were so many people who thought it was heroic to be gay. And I got tired of that. I would say to myself, I'd say, I see why people hate us. I see why straight people don't like us. I don't like us sometimes because we can be self-dramatizing. We can be self-congratulatory. And sometimes that's okay. Forever it's not. It's not okay forever. And so I want to be part of those people that get past that and say, it's not a big deal. Here's my husband. Don't worry about it, I want to normalize it. You already used the word.
Mm.
So yeah, it took me by surprise when people noticed I was gay. And then I looked at for my writing. Then I looked at what they were looking at. Oh, how can it be more blatant? A lot of this started unconsciously, that people would mention things to me and I would acknowledge, well, that's true, when I thought I was being really, subtle.
Mm.
So now it's becoming a programmatic. Is that what I want to say? One has to constantly reinvestigate one's art to make sure one has not frozen it into a point of view. So I'm hoping I'm doing that.
So how do you do that? Investigate that about your art?
What a good question.
So
Here's what I say to my creative writing classes about that. If you write the story that you intended to write, you have failed. If you write the poem that you intended to write, you have failed. Because the writing should be a process of discovery. So as long as I keep discovering myself at the end, discovering something new, I can be sure that I have not frozen into one perspective. So I suppose by following my own dicta about how a writer should work, I'll be okay, as long as I allow the story to take me with it. I taught, teach playwriting, and someone would come in and say, I want to write the great lesbian play. And I said, you're not going to do it. That will keep you, that sentence is going to keep you from doing it. And it's really sort of hard to explain how that works, but I believe that's how it works. And I think that's how you avoid becoming your own desert, which happens to so many people.
Could you talk about maybe some of the pieces that you feel like in your lifetime were maybe most poignant as a process of discovery? Like, what have you written that you were like, oh my gosh, this was the biggest discovery? Or
one of the first plays that I wrote that is mature, that is to say that I knew what I was doing, was a play called St. Patrick's Well. And it is set in Ireland, and it is about a man who discovers an inscription in a book by an Irish poet to his father, and with that has some heat to it. So the Irish poet is still alive, so he goes to Ireland to meet him and discovers that the poet and his father were lovers. And I was just writing a story but I realized, all right, here's a bunch of stuff. First of all, here's my obsession with Ireland. I always thought I was going to meet the love of my life in Ireland. That's why I kept going back, and I didn't know until I wrote that play. And I think that I had, and that was the sense of loss that the friend left the poet and came to America and had these kids and stuff, and the poet remembered that. And so I taught myself so much about what I thought of my life and the gay life. And what I thought of my life was that I had done something whereby I barely missed the person I was supposed to be with all my life. And I didn't have any idea that was going on until I wrote the play. Not even until I wrote it, until someone talked to me about it. It won a North Carolina Playwrights Prize, and when I went to see it done, there was a talk back in Greensboro. There was a talk back, and I thought, oh, fuck's sake, that is what it's about, And I didn't know. You just read the damn thing, and you know what it's about.
are there any other pieces you want to talk about that were especially formative in self-discovery?
Well, I would say all in all, the plays I've written have enabled me to enact my personality better than other things, more than other things. Excuse me. The novel that came out last year, The Falls of the Wyona, also suggested to me Let me put this. In that play, even though it happens right after World War II, and not in that book, even though it happens right after World War II, people are not much concerned when two boys are in love with each other. And when the tragedy of the book happens when someone does get concerned about it. So, you know, it was I didn't realize I was being so political, but that is my political stance, you know. Just don't worry about it. And if you're worried about it, it's your problem.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was it. That enabled me to discover something else. And again, I didn't know that was in there until someone told me. I had submitted this novel in several places, and I must have sent it to the contest. And the woman on the phone says, "Are you David Hope?" Said, "You were in it?" "Yeah." And she says, "Well, it's just won the Quill Prize." "And what's that for?" And she said, "Queer writing." And I thought, "What's queer about my?" Then I realized it was, and I realized that I was you know, doing the same thing. I didn't really intend it to be queer. I never thought this could be a queer book, although there are queer people in it. And so I sort of liked the idea that I couldn't remember why I was so queer until I sat down and reread it. Oh, that's why. These boys are having sex. So you discover, you know, people help you discover the way you are from what you say, whether you just say it in conversation or whether you say it in a, you know, in a work of intentional creation.
I wonder also if I feel like something you said earlier, and this, you know, it's not heroic to be gay. And earlier when you said something about queerness seems just kind of hidden, right? That we don't have to wear it on a sleeve or, you know, hang our
Mm-hmm.
flag off the car on the way here.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, is that like, is that always the way it is with your writing? Because everybody else really seems to, you called yourself or people started calling you a quote unquote gay writer in the 90s. When you sit down to write, are you intentionally writing to, I guess, normalize gay identity, or does the gayness come out and the way in which it comes out is so normal for you that?
I sit down to tell the story. And how it comes out, I must determine has something to do with my character. But I would say that being unintentional has always been part of my artistic process. So I don't blame myself for any of that. You know, I do not sit down in order to, I justify what I've written by saying, well, it normalizes gayness. But that was not on my, it's not on my mind when I do that. When my gay plays began being done in New York, people would say, well, how gay are they? You know, there's no, this guy's just gay, you know, and that would be what I'd say. I'd say, well, this is a political choice, you know, that they're not wearing their, you know, lavender on their sleeve. They're just living their lives. But it only came about because I found myself defending myself from people who thought that my gay plays were not gay
Yeah, that's an
enough.
interesting critique that still permeates the LGBT community, right? Like how,
Oh God, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Do you have the right vocabulary? Do you have the right, you know, there are certain ways when you, that you must demonstrate gayness. Or, what is the word now? Enacting virtue? I've forgotten what people call that.
I don't know.
Demonstrating virtue or something. You just have to do it the right way.
Do you think that the South, however you want to conceptualize that as a place or an ideology, but do you think that the South was important to your writer life or even necessary to the kind of things that you've produced over time, which span the globe, right? You write a lot of things, travel pieces and things like that from other places, set in other places beyond the South.
Mm-hmm. I've been here 38 years. I don't know how to do that experiment. You know, would I be the same person if I hadn't come here? Um, I think being in the South, let me start the sentence again. It is more special to be a writer in the South than it is to be a writer in the North, if I'm remembering things correctly. You know, it's a more of a honored vocation, you know, in the land of Eudora Welty and Flannery than it was in Ohio. That, well, you're a writer and I'm a lumberjack, you know. But see, I might be making that up. I've lived here for so long that I don't know how to be otherwise.
Mm.
You know, I thought I wanted to stay at my alma mater and teach there for the rest of my career. But UNCA offered me so much more money that I left. And I often make that comparison. Would I be the same person if I stayed in Ohio as I am here? Would I have started writing plays? Would I have started painting? Would I have, I was happy being a poet. Why did I start doing other stuff? And I don't know whether it was the new environment. I don't know. So it's hard. It's hard to know that.
About your painting, excuse me, your art and your playwriting that came about after the move here.
Everything. I was strictly a poet when I came here.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's like, I give thanks to whatever caused that. If it was the South, And it has to be said that UNCA is very supportive about doing things other than the thing you were hired to do. I was hired as the poet. UNCA encouraged me, allowed me to do everything else I wanted to do. Never said no. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
So so in that sense, this particular environment was a very good
one. So asking the question everybody wants to hear, right? So if you're comfortable, could you tell me about your own coming out journey, how you came to know yourself? And
well, that is kind of interesting to me. I've already said that I would never tell the story, but I might, because it also has to do with, as I already said,
you don't have to.
Lack of intention. When I was a little kid, I can remember going to the ice capades, and there was a famous skater named Ronnie Robertson, who was, I didn't know he was also a famous gay person, and one of the first people, and I, in the ice capades, fell in love with him. I couldn't be more 4 or 5, and I couldn't really, so I was all the time enamored of men, but never thought that was different from what was going on in the minds of the boys. I just assumed that that's is what boys do. You didn't, in the Boy Scouts, you didn't, well, sometimes did, but I couldn't tell much difference between me and the other boys. And then when it got to be dating time, what I said to my, I dated all the time. I asked girls, because that's what you did. Mm-hmm. It's not because I wanted to. And I, go out with the homecoming queen, it was fine. But I'm thinking, why don't I want to jump her bones? Why am I not horny? And I would ask, and I think it'll come. And so it was a matter of just not knowing any better. I didn't know why I was attached to men all the time. I didn't know why I was not going on about Kathy White the way the other boys in high school were. Why I didn't care about Kathy White. It's just, and when I was in graduate school, I lived across the street from, in Syracuse, across the street from the important gay assignation place. It was a hill that you could drive around and pick people up. And I would see these cars going around all the time, not know what they're for. So I wandered up there one time, and a man asked me to come in the car with him. It had never occurred to me that I was gay, even though I knew that I loved. The minute the word was applied, it all came into. And so I took it really pretty well. I went through about a month or so thinking, oh my God. But then I thought, well, fuck it. And it helped being on my own, because I didn't have to confront my parents. I lived in, and it was okay. So I had it was not without trauma, but not a very bad transition. The coming out was gradual, but it wasn't tumultuous. I didn't have to undo lies, because I'd never lied, because I didn't know myself. I had no word to call it. It's sort of interesting that even though when I was in public school in Akron, people knew that I was gay and I didn't. Things that said that people said about me suddenly made sense. Oh, that's. I remember being at this girl's house, and her boyfriend called, and she's, who's there? Well, he was. Don't worry, he's not a real boy. And I thought, but years later, I go, oh, she knew and I didn't. So I think my being oblivious about stuff in my deliberately oblivious in my writing comes from being accidentally oblivious in my life.
Hmm.
Yeah, you know, oh my God, I'm gay. Who knew? You know, everyone but you. I remember telling my sister, uh, I said, well, I want kids. And she said, well, have them. And she says, and I said, took a deep breath, you know, I'm gay. She said, yeah.
And when was that conversation?
Oh, that was when I was here. Because as I already, I dated women. You know, it's not that I cut women off, poor dear. uh, so, and again, I didn't talk about it. I didn't walk up to people and say, hey, you know, I'm gay. You know, and I guess that is next to the fiction that I just thought, why would they want to know? You know, so I didn't feel that I was hiding anything. I felt that I was not imposing too much
Oh,
information on people.
I'm writing that down. That's interesting. So, could you talk a little bit about your relationship with your parents when you came out to yourself? Did you share that information with other people in your family, or?
Just my sister. My mother's dead by then.
Okay.
Um, she died in heart surgery. I mentioned to you the year at Johns Hopkins that was so terrible. Part of it was her death.
Hmm.
Um, there's more to it, but my father and I never had that conversation. Never once discussed it. And my sister and my father's not dead, but my sister said that she and my father had discussed it, and that my father said I had told him I was not gay, and that I couldn't be gay because I didn't act gay, and because I dated women. You know, so except for my sister, who's still alive, but I felt, were they deceived? Did they not know better? You know, what does a mother know about her son? You know, that she doesn't feel like saying. You
Mm-hmm.
know, my dad was dead set against my going to see musicals in the theater, and I think about that. Did he not? Did he see that in me? So it's all speculation. It's all speculation.
So,
I
was
have
that
no.
when you were in high school? He didn't want you to go see
Yeah.
musicals, or your whole life?
Well, but he didn't have any say over it afterwards.
Okay.
But if we were picking a movie, my mother would say, "Well, let's go see The King tonight." No, no, boy, can't see that. And I never could figure that out.
That's interesting.
So this is what my father thought of it as a great mystery. Um, I remember noticing that my mother and I had the same taste in men, which I thought was really kind of fun. Although, even though I noticed it at the time, I didn't know what that meant.
Hmm.
I didn't know. All right, so she thinks he's attractive, and so do I. It never occurred to me that that was not the way it was done. No. I thought I would wake up one day and be hot for Treva Browning, and that would all be over. Didn't happen. Lucky for Treva.
Um, what was your taste in men? What is your taste in men?
A little rough. The car mechanic, farmer.
The
I was in
line,
Ireland. Pardon me?
the lineman, the electric line.
Absolutely. Yeah, the first person I met in Nashville was a lineman. Absolutely. Yeah, he was a little grubby, and I liked that. I was in Ireland once, walking around from Sligo, and this. I'm so sorry. This farmer was lifting something. It was too heavy for him, and he didn't know what to do. I could see him, so I ran up and helped him lift this thing off. And I'm saying to myself, I have to marry this man. It was, and it actually, we ended up having a relationship for as long as I was there. But that was, a farmer struggling with a piece of machinery, in Ireland. Oh my God, was
Did
right
you
down the
make it
line.
stay into a book or a play at some point?
It hasn't yet, but it just might. It was too happy. It was too happy without consequence to be a book.
Yeah.
There wasn't any dark side to
There's
it.
no
We just had a good
conflict,
time.
right?
So.
You have to have some kind of conflict could you talk a little bit about your traveling? You've gotten to travel everywhere, it seems like to me. What was traveling about for you?
Well, I think it's about what it is for other people. I just love seeing other places. Some places are mystical to me. And I think that Ireland is mystical to me in a way that other places are. Love going to Italy and all this.
Mm.
I'm going to Greece with Sophie in March if we're not all dead. But Ireland was different because I am Irish, and I felt that my life, my real life, would be there. Ireland rejected me, and I got over that. My real life is not there. The love of my life is not there. If was, I never found him. So part of it is mystical, but part of it is just curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I try to go to as many different places as I possibly can. Trying to think the Holy Land is the last place they managed to get to, that was interesting. And it was fascinating to me. So it's curiosity, it's seeing new places. And I think you mentioned before, I often get writing out of it. I've gotten a couple of stories out of a week I spent in Vienna. That seemed to be, very rich. So it's, I love to do that. I also love being at home. So it's okay. The quarantine has been okay for that.
Yeah. Do you know how many places you've been? How many countries you've seen?
Oh, 20. I've seen all but 2 of the states. Been in all 2 of the states. I like to go someplace and stay there. I don't do tours. So usually I just go to one country at a time. So I can stick that out. And you do explore gay life there. And I find that in other places really very much different.
Mm-hmm.
In many places very much suaver, or what do I want to say, less agitated than it is here. You don't expect that. If you go into every bar in Ireland, it's a gay bar, which is to say, I've picked men up in the straightest bars in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not, there are gay bars, but they're an American concoction there. They're American bars, so it is different in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Italy, you meet people on the street, so the way people relate to each other, even sexually, is interestingly different. I'd like to figure out why, why Holland and Belgium can be so different and they're so small and so close together. It's just fascinating.
Well, would you talk a little bit about the gay bar culture? Because you mentioned that early, let's see, I don't know that I wrote that down exactly. Gay life was bars. That's what you said.
Yes, gay life was bars.
Now it's
I
totally
came out in Syracuse. I was living in Syracuse when I came out. And the first thing I did was go to Gotch Cars, which is a bar. And so my statement that gay life is bars had to do with my time. It might have to do a little bit with my particular process, because that's what I found first. That's the place I knew to go to was Gotch Cars in downtown Syracuse. And then when I moved to New York, when I went to New York, it had all this stuff going. You're drunk, your inhibitions are down, everyone is there for the same reason. You can dance, and I have really nice feelings for disco in the way that most of my contemporaries don't, because I can associate with fun in the gay bar. So what I believe that gay life was largely in the bars everywhere for all people at that time, but I don't know whether that's true. It could be just the way I did it. I like bars now, even that because your inhibitions are down. You laugh and you meet new people, and it's easy. So I've always had that gay that feeling about it. Since the quarantine began, I have finished 2 books that I started when I was at UNC, but didn't dare finish because it was about the gay bar life in New York. One's about the gay bar life in New York, and one's about the gay bar life in Asheville when I first came here. And they're both of them Uh, well, shocking even to me at this point. It was, and so I just let them. While I was employed at UNCA, I figured it better not do it. But they're about, I suppose, they include the idea that the impulse of exploration that you find in a bar can become transcendent, that you can be led to do things you would never have thought of before with the right combination of personnel and alcohol.
I like that. That's a quote I'm going to use someday.
There you go.
Impulsive exploration in a gay bar is transcendent. And so, do you still go to O. Henry's? When was the last time you were there?
I bet it's 10 years. Oh. But you know, it has to do with parking.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it really does. When I think about it, it's, you know, the last couple of times I was there, I went because I thought I ought to. I thought I ought to support a gay institution. And so I would go there and have my drink and, you know, but now I think, well, park maybe. So it's not O. Henry's fault that I don't go there anymore, but it has been a long time.
Well, what kind of socializing are you doing with other LGBT folks in town? How are you keeping community, or are you?
I have fallen down on my responsibilities.
I don't mean it as a responsibility, like a social, like having your friends and.
Well, most of the friends I have now are from the gay chorus. Most of my gay friends now are from gay chorus or from All Souls, or people that are left over from you know, the time before. As far as I can tell, gay life in Asheville is very domestic now. Yeah. You don't go out, you don't go to bars, you sit in your house and have barbecues. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm not a barbecue person, so in some ways, you know, gay life has evolved past me. Mm. You know, I go to bars and meet people, and that's just not done anymore. At least not people my age, I suppose. Although I haven't passed the test. You know, I haven't been out in 10 years. I've been out other places, been out in Dublin and Rome places, not here. Mm. Yeah, so I must not feel the need, since I don't put much effort into it.
Could you talk a little bit about All Souls? Because you mentioned them early, and I just think the pillar that All Souls is in this community is just kind of radical, really. The way in which the work that they have done and have been doing for decades.
Yes.
To create a space of inclusion and education. You know, I read so many things about with Closer, like Holly coming in and doing lectures and things like that. Could you just talk about some of that stuff and how you were involved in it? How did you even end up at All Souls?
I'll go the easiest one first, how I ended up at All Souls. I was here about 5 years. Is that right? About 5 years, but I decided I'm no longer going to walk up and down the paths in Bent Creek looking for sex on a Sunday morning. I'm going to go to church. Now, this came about because I've always sung in a church. When I was at Johns Hopkins, I made my money by singing, by being a bass soloist in a Lutheran church. So I've always done that, and I wanted to get back to that. So and Episcopal churches have the best music by and large. So I tried every Episcopal church in Asheville, and the one that took was All Souls, and it took because of the priest at that time, Neil Zabriskie, was so impressive. And so I joined the church and joined the choir. And the deacon there, a deacon is a clergyman who has chosen a particular social activity to pursue. And her activity, Joan Marshall was her name, was the lesbian gay community. So to Joan Marshall can be attributed, I think, the fact that All Souls was a pillar of gay rights and gay education, because she worked very hard at that. She was there for every closer meeting. She was there for every saga meeting. When AIDS hit Asheville hard, she was there as, you know, to comfort and help people with that. So she quarreled with the bishop. She quarreled with the dean of the cathedral, once it became a cathedral. She fought very hard to make sure that gay people were accepted at All Souls. There were times, my belief is, that the only church a gay person could go to in Asheville was All Souls. I don't know that that's true, but that's what we told ourselves. And the congregation would be full of gay people, to the degree that we'd have other congregants saying, well, we love our gay people so much, we'd like to spread you out some so other people can have it. And people say that to you to your face, and think, oh, are you hearing yourself? So I want to say it was largely Joan Marshall, but she had tremendous backing from the congregants, from the congregation. And if they didn't like it, they left. For a long time, people would just leave All Souls a lot, and it was almost always with the gay issue. It is not that emphasized anymore, but in defense of All Souls, I want to say that it doesn't need to be. I don't think the gay interests have to be fought for quite so hard as they did the end of the 80s in Asheville. And so All Souls was there when we needed it. Now it's gone under other things like social justice, poverty issues, which I think, well, why not?
Absolutely.
So that is my take on it. It comes pretty much down to Joan Marshall, and also the fact that her dean, Neil Zabriskie, was browbeaten into supporting her. You know, she had to educate him, but she did.
Could you talk a little bit about the education, like the outreach stuff? Because it wasn't just about trying to educate people within the church. Like, they invited community people in to Closer and things like that.
Yeah.
How successful do you think that was in shifting kind of the rhetoric, anti-gay rhetoric here? Was it formative, or?
I think that it means something when a church does that, and a mainline church that became the cathedral.
Right.
All right, it wasn't a cathedral then, but it is now. And so people stop bitching about it when it becomes institutionalized. Now, I think that my belief is that people want to be swayed by reason. And if you're patient enough, you can convince them, no, these gay people are not any different from what you are. And if you say that often enough, people will believe it. Also did that. It lived that. It never allowed anti-gay rhetoric, and it mostly took the, I think, especially Christian route of demonstrating love by supporting the people who came there. You know, just saying, yes, you support. Here's some money. Here's a place to live. Yes, we know you have AIDS, but you can still come to the services. You know, and Closer always met at All Souls. The gay men's course has always met at All Souls. You know, but then so have Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not just that.
Right.
But it's opened its doors, and I think that it succeeded through tenacity. I mean, that's taken 20 years, don't you think? You know, for people to stop being so touchy about gay stuff.
Right. Just as though, you know, gayness is contagious or something, right?
Right. Oh, the issue with the chalice, especially when AIDS, you know, what do you do with the chalice? Because everybody, well, alcohol kills, but you know, people didn't want to hear. It was, you know, people were just frightened. People, you know, with children would say, I know it's not me. I have nothing against gays, but my children.
Tell me about that. What was that like? So how did they change policy, or they didn't, or they just
left? Yeah. Well, part of it was that Neil Zabriskie was a querulous old man, or took no shit, or, you know, something. He would say, if you don't like it, here go. You know, he would not back off. Once he was committed to that, he would not back off, and people would. You know, behind that is, I know they're okay, but they're going to molest my children. you know, and they didn't have to say that. You knew that's what. And so, you know, they'd say, well, if you're afraid, go somewhere else, which seems to me to be, yes, go somewhere. If you're, yeah. So I think it was moral courage, non-demonstrative moral courage. People were not strutting about with, you know, medals on the chest, but they just wouldn't put up with shit. And I admire that so much. I miss Neil, I miss Joan, you know. Now there are other people there who have taken up different sorts of crusades, and they're also admirable. But you know, I think that the gay lesbian thing was the chanciest thing for them to do. You know, there was also some luck in having Bishop Johnson, who recognized the validity of the gay rights movement. I don't know if he was enthusiastic about it, but he said you could see no moral reason to treat gay people any different from anyone else. So the bishop in an Episcopal church, the bishop is important. So they also had him behind this.
Absolutely. I am like noticing our time. Are you doing all right? We've been talking forever.
Have we?
Wear you out.
Well, you know, I'm here with not much to do. So if you want to, you know, do this again, we can certainly do it. But
well, can I ask you a couple more questions?
You sure can.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about that time in the late 80s and the early 90s when everybody in the country is really learning about HIV and AIDS and just trying to wrap their heads around what's happening and just the real kind of genocide of people that began to happen. What was it like here in Asheville? And
I first heard about AIDS when I was in New York, and the first person I knew to die of it was the choir master. I sang it in a group called Pro Musica, and the director in New York, and the director of that got AIDS and died of it really pretty quickly. I don't even know it was called AIDS then. For a while, it was gay cancer. You probably know the history of all this. People wondering what it was. Some people thought paupers did it. Some people thought that if you were having a number of sexual contacts, that there was a magic number that your body started falling apart afterwards, you know. I kid you not. When I came to Asheville, the first couple of years I was here, I would have someone from the AIDS organization come to my classes and talk about AIDS awareness. That stopped after about 5 years because people didn't care anymore. They were no longer afraid of AIDS. Now, part of it is AIDS is no longer a necessarily a death sentence. So people weren't terrified. But it's like Trump and the COVID saying it'll go away. Well, it will. You know, given a decade or something. And that sort of happened here. The people in the bars in Asheville, I'm going to go ahead and say, didn't care. There was, as far as I could tell, there was no extra caution. It was not like it was in New York, a place where people were just really cautious about that. It was just, let's go ahead and do it. We're too far out in the boonies, you know, and just the thought that that's not our problem. Now, when Asheville people began getting AIDS, many of them, the Joan Marshall's ministry had also took care of them. So we knew about how people were dying of AIDS, you know, and a lot of those people would be in our congregation 1 week, and 2 weeks later they would be dead. I'm not sure what the impression in the gay world was of that. I didn't notice much remission of sexual activity. You know, and I wasn't doing a study of it, so I might be wrong about that, but caretakers seem to be much more worried about people with AIDS than people who might be getting AIDS. You know, I stopped counting at 40 of the people I knew in Asheville who died of AIDS. You know, but that was, you know, when it was, but I don't know that it made that much difference to community awareness. Have you developed a feeling that it was otherwise? What have other people said about that?
I haven't gotten a whole lot of conversation around that actually. I really haven't. So that's why you're going to be my primary source
Oh,
here.
okay. Well, I've done Angels in America a couple times and wondered why I wasn't getting through. Well, they didn't care about AIDS. You know, the idea that it was an AIDS epic didn't help in their understanding of the play. You
Mm,
know, so now it's later, it's afterwards, but it doesn't have much historical presence.
mm.
So I don't know what to say about that. But
Do
people
you
knew people were dying.
do you
Didn't matter.
feel like did you encounter educational efforts or prevention efforts anywhere in your comings and goings during that time?
Well, yes, you know the condom guy from downtown?
Michael Harney.
Yes, Michael Harney. You mentioned him earlier. Absolutely, yeah. He was always on it.
Yep.
Here, have a condom. Here, have a condom. Here, you know. So you'd have that, someone who had taken it upon themselves to be observant in that stuff.
Mhm. So was Harney like a one-man show then? Was that really, I
As
mean,
far as I know, for a while he was supported a little bit by Salga, but I don't know whether we started him or not. I know we bought him condoms for a while,
mm-hmm.
but he outlasted us.
Yeah. Mm.
I miss him. Is he still out and about?
Yeah, yeah, he's still he was at Wing Gap, you know.
WinCap did.
And he came that kind of came when he came in 93, maybe 92, early 90s is when he came, I think.
Is that when WinCap was starting? WinCap did well on that.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about WinCap anymore. I've lost track of it, but for a while it was important.
Yeah.
You
They're
know,
still doing a lot of stuff.
good,
Really,
good.
they are. Do you remember, since you kind of knew the caretaker side of it or saw some of that through Joan and others, do you feel like AIDS patients experience a lot of discrimination here with healthcare and being able to be caretaken?
I think early on the ignorance of AIDS made people afraid of them. I think that as time went on, that became less because you don't get it by touching someone. You don't get it from, you know, there's a whole bunch of, it's a difficult disease to get actually, unlike COVID. So when people realized that, I think some of the fear went away, but ignorance made people with AIDS scary, you know, and backed off. And you know, the ignorance was in the gay community as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's magic that went on, the magical things you could do not to get AIDS, and you know, just well, you know, it's caused by poppers. Just don't do
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like
Or douche, right? If you'll douche afterwards or something like that, then you don't, you know, those kinds of things.
yeah, or if what was an oral is okay, you know, it's like you know.
But it is really interesting to me how the rhetoric around COVID and what we knew, what we know and don't know, and just all of that obscurity is very similar. It really is. Is
And
Joe,
you have a president ignoring it. Reagan
and exactly, there's that.
didn't say a word about AIDS.
Right. No, that's true. That's absolutely true. Is Joan Marshall still around, or
She's
she's,
dead.
I was gonna say she'd be somebody definitely I'd love to interview. Do you
She,
have recommendations of other people that we might want to interview? You're welcome to just email them to me, but be thinking about who might be some good people for
I
us.
will email them because I probably can. I could probably think of some people. Yeah,
That'd
yeah,
be great.
that's cool. It seems like you know everybody already, though. It's
Hey,
fascinating.
I'm telling you, I've gotten to it's just I love oral history. You know, my dissertation was oral history based around white progressive whiteness in terms of identity, racial identity, and I just love how people just tell you stuff. I've heard the best sex stories. Oh my gosh, just so much fun stuff.
Well, your history, it's different from just telling a dirty story. You know, if it's history.
It still has the same like effect on me.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. That's the important thing.
Yeah. I have a lot more things that I'd really like to talk to you about, but we're getting close to 2 hours, so I'm gonna give you pause. I would like to schedule a follow-up with you maybe in a couple of weeks if you're
Sure.
around. because we didn't really talk about the Gay Men's Chorus at all. And I wanted to talk about, like, have you ever been, what your pride events have been, if you've been to parades or any of those
Every year.
things. Like, so I'd like to hear about all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot still to get.
Well, we'll make another date.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me or anything like that?
I don't at this moment, but I know how to get a hold of you.
Okay.
And I will email you questions if I have them.
Okay. Thank you so much, David. This is a
This
real
has been fun. It's been
Yeah,
fun.
it should be. Telling your story should be fun. And it's one of the things is, you know, you be thinking about what parts of your story you want to tell that I don't know to ask about, right? So I have a certain list of questions, but I know you are already a master storyteller. And so be thinking about what more you want to share with us as well.
Sure, I will.
All right.
You have a good day now.
You too. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.